The security guard said my wife and her fiance just went out. I'm Daniel Mitchell, and I've been married to Callista for 22 years. 22 years of erasing our cuts while she built her empire. 22 years of being introduced as just helping with the children. 22 years of watching her climb from junior analyst to CEO of Cromwell Capital, a $180 million investment firm. 22 years of family dinners where she'd talk about her real work while mine was invisible. But here's what Callista didn't know, what none of them knew. I hadn't been unemployed, not even close. When I surprised my CEO wife at work and found she had a fiance, I just thanked the security guard, walked back to my car, and made 3 phone calls. The first was to my patent attorney. The second was to my largest client. The third was to someone who'd been gathering evidence for 6 months. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. This story is about what happens when people mistake your kindness for weakness and forget that the quietest person in the room might be the most powerful. Let me paint you a picture of what unemployed looked like in my family. 3 weeks ago, Sarah brought her boyfriend home from college, 22 years old, studying business at State. Nice kid, actually. But when he asked what I did for work, Sarah jumped in before I could answer. Oh, Dad doesn't really work. He's more like a house husband. The way she said it. Like I was a pet. Her boyfriend looked confused. But how do you afford... He gestured around our 4,000 square foot house in Bellevue. Mom's the breadwinner, Sarah said quickly. Dad just takes care of stuff around here. Callista smiled from across the room, that satisfied smile she got when her narrative stayed intact. I'd spent that morning on a video call with automotive engineers in Stuttgart, a consultation worth $15,000. But to my family, I was just taking care of stuff around here. The pattern repeated everywhere. Last month, Ryan's school held a career day. Parents were supposed to talk about their professions. Ryan specifically asked me not to come. It's embarrassing, Dad. All the other parents have real jobs. Real jobs? I'd been invited to speak at MIT that same week about advanced materials patents. But my son was embarrassed I might show up at his high school. The country club was the worst. Callista loved those monthly networking dinners. 200 of Seattle's business elite, comparing portfolios and dropping company names. She'd introduce me the same way every time. This is my husband Daniel. He helps out with the kids. Helps out. Like childcare was a hobby. Last September, we sat with the Hendersons. Bill Henderson runs a tech startup, just got his Series B funding. His wife asked what I did. Daniel's between opportunities right now, Callista answered before I could speak. Between opportunities. For 8 years. Bill nodded politely and changed the subject to the Seahawks. But here's what made it perfect. What made it beautiful, actually. Nobody questioned the story. Why would they? Successful woman, supportive husband, nice house, well-behaved kids. The math worked in their minds, so they never dug deeper. Callista controlled our joint checking account. She paid the mortgage, the car payments, the country club dues. In their world, that meant she made all the money. What they didn't see was the other account, the one under Mitchell Technical Solutions, LLC, the one with deposits from clients in 12 countries. What they didn't see was my home office, hidden behind the bookshelf in the basement, the one with patent certificates on the wall and contracts signed with companies they'd recognize. What they didn't see was that for 8 years, while they thought I was helping with the kids, I'd been building something they couldn't imagine. Callista especially couldn't imagine it. Last month, she brought her laptop to breakfast, reviewing quarterly reports for Cromwell Capital. Looks like we're losing some major clients, she said, frustrated. They're going with this boutique consulting firm, something called Mitchell Technical Solutions. Never heard of them, but they're apparently offering specialized engineering analysis. I buttered my toast and asked if she wanted more coffee. It's probably some foreign company undercutting us, she continued. These specialty consultants are killing traditional firms. I nodded sympathetically. My company had just signed 3 of her former clients, including Boeing's aerospace division, a 2-year contract worth $430,000. But Callista saw what she expected to see. unemployed husband, successful wife, natural order maintained. The beautiful thing about being invisible is that nobody watches what you're actually doing. They were about to learn what I'd been doing for 8 years. But first, they needed to push just a little harder. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, not hand-delivered by Callista, not even discussed, just sitting on my desk like a grocery list. 43 pages of legal language that boiled down to one message: you get nothing. I read through the asset division carefully. Callista would keep the house, worth $800,000. The investment portfolio, worth $320,000. Both cars, including the BMW X7 she'd bought without telling me. Even my tools in the garage were listed as community property staying with the residents. My share? $22,000 in our joint savings account. For 22 years of marriage, the custody arrangement was worse. Sarah and Ryan were adults now, so no custody to fight over. But there was a clause about college expenses. Callista would continue paying their tuition to ensure stability during this transition. Translation: she controlled their future, and kids follow the money. Sarah had already made her position clear at dinner the night before. "Mom, you should have done this years ago," she'd said, cutting her steak. "You deserve someone who actually contributes." Ryan nodded along. "Yeah, Dad, no offense, but Mom shouldn't have to carry the whole family financially." No offense. I'd put both of them through private school. Not Callista. Me. Payments coming from my consulting contracts while she built her career. But they didn't know that. In their minds, Mommy paid for everything while Daddy sat around the house. If I signed these papers, that narrative became permanent truth. Worse, Callista had been strategic about timing. The papers were dated 3 days before Christmas, right before family gatherings where she'd announce her fresh start, right before Sarah's graduation where I'd be introduced as her former stepfather or whatever divorced dads become. I could already see the conversations. Daniel just couldn't find his footing professionally. Sometimes marriages outgrow themselves. Callista's much happier now that she doesn't have to support another adult. The social humiliation was designed to be complete, but the financial implications were actually worse than the emotional ones. If I stayed silent, I'd lose everything I'd actually built. Not just the fake unemployed persona, but the real assets Callista didn't know existed. See, our prenup from 1998 had some interesting language. Property acquired through individual effort during marriage remained separate. Callista's business success stayed hers. My individual achievements stayed mine. But if I didn't disclose my business assets during divorce proceedings, I could lose the legal protection. Courts don't like hidden assets, even legal ones. I had 30 days to respond to her filing, 30 days to decide, stay invisible and lose everything, or reveal 8 years of hidden success and change the entire game. The smart move was probably to disappear quietly. Take my $22,000, find an apartment somewhere, start over at 59 years old. No fuss, no drama, no explanation required. Callista expected me to disappear quietly. That's why she'd filed papers instead of talking. She assumed I'd sign them, like I'd accepted everything else for 22 years. My kids expected me to disappear quietly, too. They'd probably feel relieved not having to explain their unemployed father anymore. But there was one thing they'd all forgotten. I'd spent 8 years learning that being underestimated is the most powerful position you can hold. 8 years watching Callista compete against companies she didn't know I owned. 8 years listening to my children apologize for having a father who didn't do anything. 8 years building something they couldn't impeach in while they built their assumptions about who I was. If I stayed quiet now, all of that preparation was wasted. But if I spoke up, everything changed. Not just for me, for all of them. Callista had built her confidence on being the family's financial powerhouse. What happened when she discovered she'd been competing with her husband all along? Sarah and Ryan had built their identities around having a successful mother and unemployed father. What happened when they learned their unemployed father had been paying their bills? Their assumptions were about to meet reality. But timing mattered. How you reveal 8 years of hidden success determines whether people see you as strategic or deceptive. I needed the perfect moment, the perfect audience, The perfect way to let them discover the truth instead of me telling them. Lucky for me, Callista had already provided the perfect opportunity. The Cromwell Capital holiday party was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare the ground, 3 weeks to gather the documentation, 3 weeks to set up the most elegant reveal possible. By Christmas, either my family would understand who I really was, or they'd be too busy dealing with the consequences to matter. But first, they needed to push a little harder. Callista called the family meeting for Sunday afternoon. We need to discuss some practical matters, she announced at breakfast, using her boardroom voice at our kitchen table. Sarah and Ryan exchanged glances. They knew about the divorce papers, probably had known before I did. We assembled in the living room like shareholders at a hostile takeover. Callista, in her usual armchair, establishing dominance. Kids on the couch, united front. Me in the reading chair, supposedly getting fired. I think we all know why we're here, Callista began. Actually, I had a pretty good idea why we were here, but I was curious to see how she'd frame it. Your father and I have decided to divorce. Decided. Like I'd been part of the decision. The papers are already filed, she continued. This is about managing the transition practically. Sarah leaned forward. What does that mean for us? Nothing changes for you two. I'll continue covering your education expenses. The house stays stable. This is really just about your father. Finding his independence. At 59, after 22 years of marriage. Dad, where will you live? Ryan asked. Good question. I looked at Callista, curious about her answer. We're discussing options, Callista said smoothly. The important thing is everyone stays civilized about this. Civilized. Like I was a potential problem to manage. Can I ask something? I said quietly. Callista's eyebrows went up slightly, like she was surprised I was speaking. These education expenses you mentioned, for Sarah and Ryan. What about them? How much exactly are we talking about? Sarah looked confused. Dad, you know how much college costs? I did know, exactly, down to the penny. Humor me, I said. Callista, what's your annual education budget for our kids? Daniel, this isn't really $43,000 for Sarah at State, $38,000 for Ryan at community college before he transfers. Call it $81,000 per year. Does that sound right? Callista's jaw tightened. Yes, approximately. And you're comfortable covering that yourself, going forward? Of course. It's my responsibility as their mother. Her responsibility. Interesting phrase. Mom's been covering everything anyway, Sarah said defensively. It's not like you contribute to those payments. Ah, there it was. I pulled out my phone. Not dramatically, just casually, like checking the time. I got a call yesterday, I said, from someone asking about consulting work. They offered me a contract. Ryan looked puzzled. Consulting what? Engineering analysis, materials science, patent review. Callista actually laughed. Daniel, please, let's be realistic here. The contract was for 6 months, I continued. They offered $90,000. The room went quiet. 90,000? Sarah said slowly. For 6 months of work, I confirmed. That's, what, 15,000 a month? Callista's smile faded. Daniel, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying someone thinks my experience is worth $15,000 a month. What experience? Ryan asked. 28 years in aerospace engineering. 14 patents in advanced materials. 8 years of independent consulting. The silence stretched longer this time. Callista found her voice first. Consulting for whom? Boeing, Airbus, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Tesla's materials division, a few German automotive companies. I said it like I was listing grocery items. That's not possible, Sarah said. Which part? Any of it. You haven't what? Callista stood up abruptly. Daniel, this is ridiculous. You've been unemployed for 8 years. Have I? Yes! You haven't held a job since Sarah was 4 years old. I haven't held a job, I agreed. I've owned a consulting company. Ryan was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. What consulting company? Mitchell Technical Solutions, incorporated in Delaware 8 years ago. Callista's face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, then something approaching panic. That's impossible, she said. I would know. I handle our finances. You handle our joint checking account, I corrected. You pay the mortgage and the household expenses. But I have my own business accounts. Show us, Sarah demanded. I looked at Callista. Are you sure you want to see this? Once we go down this road, things change. Show us, Callista repeated, her CEO voice cracking slightly. I opened my banking app. The screen showed the account summary for Mitchell Technical Solutions. Current balance, $247,000. I handed the phone to Sarah. Her eyes went wide. This is your account? Business operating account. The money comes and goes depending on project schedules. Callista snatched the phone, stared at the screen. Her face went pale. Last month's deposits were $137,000, I said conversationally. The German automotive contract was the big one. They paid in euros, so the exchange rate helped. You've been lying to us, Ryan said quietly. Have I? When did I ever say I was unemployed? They looked at each other. You said you were between opportunities, Sarah said weakly. Your mother said that. I just didn't correct her. Callista was still staring at my phone. This doesn't make sense. How could you... Where do you even work? Home office, behind the bookshelf downstairs. I had it soundproof 3 years ago. The room you said was storage? It's storage too, for my patents and client files. Callista handed back my phone like it was radioactive. This changes everything, she said. Does it? The divorce papers, the asset division, will need to be revised, I agreed. Significantly. I stood up and headed toward the door. Where are you going? Callista called. Downstairs, to my office. I have a conference call with Tokyo in 20 minutes. I paused at the doorway. Callista, about that holiday party next month, I think I'll attend after all. After the family meeting, things got weird. Not angry weird, not dramatic weird, just suspended weird, like everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Callista started watching me differently, studying me during breakfast like I was a puzzle she'd never bothered to solve. Sarah began asking careful questions about my consulting work, like testing whether my story would stay consistent. Ryan just looked confused most of the time, but the really interesting changes happened around my phone calls. For 8 years, I'd taken client calls in my soundproof office, private conversations that my family never heard, but now they were paying attention to every ring, every conversation they could catch fragments of. Tuesday morning, the call came from Eleanor Hayes. Daniel? Eleanor, I've got a situation. Eleanor Hayes, CEO of Pinnacle Manufacturing, 40-year-old woman who'd built a $3 billion industrial empire by being smarter and tougher than everyone around her. Also, my biggest client for the past 4 years. Tell me, I said, closing my office door. But Callista was in the kitchen directly above my office, and the heating vent carried sound better than I'd realized. The EPA is questioning our new alloy specifications, Eleanor continued, the ones you designed for the automotive contracts. They want independent verification that the materials meet environmental standards. Which standards specifically? Recycling compliance for electric vehicle batteries. If we can't prove the alloy breaks down properly, we lose the Tesla contract. $240 million. I pulled up the molecular composition files on my computer. Send me the EPA correspondence. I'll have a response by Thursday. Daniel, you're literally saving my company here. That's what you pay me for. What do I pay you again? I lose track with all these consulting contracts. I smiled. $260,000 annually, plus project bonuses. Right. Cheap at twice the price. I hung up and found Callista standing at the top of the basement stairs. Business call? She asked casually. Materials science consultation. Anything interesting? EPA compliance review? Nothing dramatic. But I could see her mind working. $260,000 annually, plus bonuses. The math was finally adding up for her. Wednesday brought the call from Germany. Herr Mitchell, Friedrich Wagner, Hoffmann Automotive. Wagner spoke excellent English with that precise German accent that makes everything sound important. Friedrich, how's the prototype testing? Exceptional results. Your titanium composite performed 30% better than specifications. We want to expand the contract. Expand how? Double the volume. 18 months instead of 9. Are you available for that timeline? I checked my project calendar. Depends on compensation adjustment. We're prepared to offer 450,000 euros. Total contract value. Callista was definitely listening now. I could hear floorboards creaking above my office. I'll need to review my other commitments, I said. Can you give me 48 hours? Certainly, but Daniel, this technology could revolutionize electric vehicle manufacturing. You should be proud. Just doing my job, Friedrich. After I hung up, Callista appeared in my office doorway. Was that German? She asked. Austrian, technically, but yes. They offered you 400,000 euros? 450 for an 18-month materials development project. She did the currency conversion in her head. That's almost $500,000. Approximately. Callista sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair she'd never bothered to sit in during 8 years of marriage. Daniel, I need to ask you something directly. Okay. How much money do you actually make? I turned my computer screen toward her, showed her my client roster spreadsheet. 12 active contracts. Annual values ranging from 50,000 to 400,000. Total projected income for this fiscal year, $920,000. Callista stared at the numbers for a long time. You make almost $1 million a year, she said quietly. This year will be my best yet. More than me. Significantly more than you. She was quiet for another minute. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. That's not an answer. I leaned back in my chair. Callista, for 8 years, you introduced me as unemployed. For 8 years, you told our children I didn't contribute financially. For 8 years, you built your identity around being the family breadwinner. So if I told you the truth, what would that have done to your identity? She didn't answer. Besides, I continued, I was curious how far you'd take it. How long you'd assume I was worthless just because you couldn't see my work. Callista stood up abruptly. The divorce papers, she said, will need to be substantially revised. The asset division was based on incomplete information. She headed toward the door, then stopped. Daniel, that holiday party next month, are you planning something? I smiled. Just planning to attend. Why do I feel like that's not the whole answer? Maybe because you're finally paying attention. The country club dinner happened every third Thursday of the month. November's theme was Celebrating Seattle's Rising Stars. 200 business leaders, all patting themselves on the back for another year of success. Callista had been looking forward to this one for weeks. The Times is doing a feature story she had mentioned at breakfast. Top 10 female executives reshaping the Pacific Northwest economy. I'm number 4. Number 4 out of 10. Not bad for someone who'd built Cromwell Capital from a 12-person firm into a regional powerhouse. I was genuinely proud of her accomplishment. Too bad she was about to destroy it. We arrived at 7:30. The usual crowd filled the grand ballroom. Investment bankers, tech entrepreneurs, real estate developers, a few politicians trying to look relevant. Callista wore her navy Armani suit, the one that made her look like she owned everything in sight. I wore khakis and a button-down shirt, the uniform of invisible husbands everywhere. Perfect camouflage. The Hendersons waved us over to their table. Bill Henderson from Tuesday's tech startup, his wife Janet, who runs a boutique marketing firm. Nice people. Successful people. People who knew their place in Seattle's business hierarchy. Callista! Janet stood to hug her. Congratulations on the Times article. We're so proud. Thanks, hun. Still feels surreal. They hugged like old friends, which they were. 20 years of country club dinners create genuine bonds. Bill shook my hand politely. Daniel, good to see you. You too, Bill. No follow-up questions about what I was doing. No interest in my activities. Just the social minimum required for wives' husbands. We ordered drinks and settled into familiar conversation patterns. Callista held court, describing Cromwell Capital's latest acquisition, a small investment firm in Portland that specialized in green technology. $15 million deal, all cash. The due diligence was incredible, she said. Took 6 months to verify their portfolio values. That's the challenge with emerging tech, Bill agreed. So many variables. Janet leaned in conspiratorially. Callista, who does your technical analysis? The engineering evaluations must be complex. We use several consulting firms, Callista said. Depends on the specific technology. Anyone we'd know? Callista paused. Actually, there's this boutique firm that's been doing excellent work, Mitchell Technical Solutions. They specialize in materials science and patent analysis. My water glass stopped halfway to my mouth. Bill looked interested. Never heard of them. Local company? I think so. Their lead consultant is incredibly thorough, really understands the technical side of manufacturing patents. Janet nodded approvingly. Good technical consultants are worth their weight in gold. Exactly. This guy saved us from a bad investment last month. Some startup claiming their alloy was revolutionary. Turned out to be mostly marketing hype. I set down my water glass carefully. What kind of alloy? I asked. Callista turned to me, surprised I was following the conversation. Titanium composite for automotive applications. The startup claimed it was 30% stronger than existing materials. Was it? According to our consultant, the specifications were impossible. The molecular structure they described couldn't exist with current manufacturing techniques. Interesting, because I'd reviewed that exact startup 3 months ago, and the specifications weren't impossible. They were just expensive to manufacture. Did your consultant provide alternative recommendations? I asked. Callista looked puzzled. Daniel, why the sudden interest in metallurgy? Just curious about your work. Bill jumped back in. Callista, you mentioned this consultant saved you money. What kind of investment are we talking about? The startup wanted $8 million for a 30% stake. Our technical analysis showed their claims were fraudulent. Wow, $8 million mistake avoided. Exactly. Good consultants earn their fees. Janet raised her wine glass. To technical expertise preventing expensive mistakes. We all toasted, but I was thinking about that startup. Advanced Materials Innovations. I'd spent 3 weeks reviewing their patents and testing protocols. My conclusion? Their technology was legitimate, but they needed better manufacturing partners. I'd recommended Cromwell Capital pass on the investment. Not because the technology was fraudulent, because I didn't want Callista competing with my clients in Germany who were developing similar materials. Conflict of interest doesn't begin to describe it. Daniel? Callista was looking at me strangely. You're very quiet tonight. Just enjoying the conversation. But my mind was racing through other deals, other technical consultations I'd provided to Cromwell Capital through anonymous subcontracting arrangements. How many times had I steered Callista away from investments that would compete with my direct clients? How many times had I essentially been competing with my own wife without her knowledge? The answer was uncomfortable. Bill was still talking about consulting firms. You know what's funny? My startup uses technical consultants too. Materials analysis for our battery technology. The guy we work with is brilliant, really understands the intersection of chemistry and manufacturing. What's his company called? Janet asked. Mitchell Technical Solutions, actually. Callista's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Mitchell Technical Solutions? She repeated. Yeah? Same consultant you use, probably? The Pacific Northwest tech scene is pretty small. Callista was staring at Bill. What's the consultant's name? Daniel Mitchell. Why, do you know him? The silence at our table stretched long enough to become awkward. Callista's face went through several expressions. Confusion, recognition, horror. Daniel Mitchell, she said slowly. Right. Great guy. Really knows his stuff. Callista turned to look at me. Really look at me. Daniel, she said carefully, your last name is Mitchell. It is. And you told us you do engineering consulting. I do. Bill was catching up to the conversation. Wait, you're Daniel? From Mitchell Technical? I am. Holy shit. Sorry, ladies. But Daniel, you're the guy who saved our company 6 months ago. The battery chemistry analysis that prevented us from wasting $2 million on the wrong manufacturing process. Callista was still staring at me. You work for Bill's company, she said. I work for lots of companies, including mine. Through subcontracting arrangements, yes. The table had gone completely quiet. Other diners were starting to notice our conversation. How long? Callista asked. How long what? How long have you been my technical consultant? About 4 years, since you started focusing on technology investments. Callista stood up abruptly. Her chair made a scraping noise that echoed across the ballroom. Excuse me, she said loudly. I need some air. She walked toward the exit with her CEO stride, but faster, like she was fleeing a building collapse. Every head in the ballroom turned to watch her leave. Bill looked confused. Did I say something wrong? Not wrong, I said. Just illuminating. Janet leaned across the table. Daniel, should we be concerned? Probably. I stood up and followed my wife toward the lobby. But I wasn't hurrying. For 8 years, Callista had been paying my consulting firm to compete with her own business development. She was about to realize that her unemployed husband had been her most trusted advisor all along. The revelation was going to get much worse before it got better. Callista didn't speak to me for 3 days. Not angry silence. Strategic silence. The kind of quiet that means someone is reorganizing their entire understanding of reality. I found her in our bedroom Thursday night, surrounded by papers, financial statements, consulting contracts, phone records. She'd been conducting an audit. How much? She said without looking up. How much what? How much has Cromwell Capital paid your company over the past 4 years? I sat down in the reading chair. You really want to know? I've been trying to calculate it myself. The subcontracting payments are buried in our vendor expenses, but I can see patterns. She held up a bank statement. Payments to Mitchell Technical Solutions, always through intermediary consulting firms, always for technical analysis. That's standard practice. Most clients prefer anonymity for specialized consultations. Daniel. She finally looked at me. How much? $630,000, plus expenses. Callista set down the papers. Over 4 years? Over 4 years. She was quiet for a long moment. So I've been paying my unemployed husband over $600,000 for business consulting. Technically, you've been paying my company. There's a legal distinction. Don't be cute with me right now. Fair enough. Callista, you hired the best technical consultant available in the Pacific Northwest. The fact that you're married to him doesn't change the quality of the work. It changes everything about conflict of interest. Does it? Name one recommendation I made that hurt Cromwell Capital. She couldn't, because I'd been scrupulously honest in my technical assessments, even when it cost my other clients opportunities. That's not the point, she said. What is the point? The point is that you let me think I was supporting an unemployed husband while you were actually running $1 million consulting business. $920,000 this year. Stop correcting me. Callista stood up and started pacing. Do you understand how this looks? How this makes me look? How does it make you look? Like an idiot. Like someone who doesn't even know her own husband's profession. I watched her pace for a minute. Callista, can I ask you something? What? In 4 years of using my technical consulting services, did you ever suspect? Suspect what? That your consultant understood your business unusually well. That the analysis was always precisely tailored to your specific needs. That the turnaround time was impossibly fast. She stopped pacing. Did you ever wonder why Mitchell Technical Solutions was always available when you needed them? Why they never seemed to have scheduling conflicts? Why they understood your company culture so perfectly? Callista sat back down. I thought you were just very good at your job. I am very good at my job. The question is, did you ever wonder who I was? I never thought about it. You never thought about it. Your most valuable vendor, and you never thought about who was actually doing the work. We went through intermediaries. That's how these arrangements work. It's also how people avoid asking uncomfortable questions. Callista was quiet again. The Cromwell Capital holiday party is next week, I said. I know. I'd like to attend. Daniel, that's not a good idea. Not right now. Actually, it's a perfect idea. She looked at me suspiciously. What are you planning? Nothing dramatic. I'd just like to meet some of your colleagues properly. What does that mean? It means I'd like to introduce myself as Daniel Mitchell from Mitchell Technical Solutions. Callista's face went pale. You can't do that. Why not? Because, because, because it would be embarrassing for you? Yes. More embarrassing than divorcing your unemployed husband? She didn't answer. Callista, you have a choice. You can introduce me as your husband who runs a successful consulting firm, or I can introduce myself. Is that a threat? It's an observation. The truth comes out eventually. The only question is whether you control how it comes out. Callista gathered up her papers. I need to think about this. You have until next Thursday. And if I say no, then you'll discover how persuasive I can be when I stop being quiet. The Cromwell Capital holiday party was always the biggest event of their year. 400 guests, including clients, vendors, industry leaders, and media. Black tie, open bar, live jazz band in the grand ballroom at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Callista's moment to shine. This year, she'd planned something special. The Times article about Seattle's top female executives was being celebrated with a presentation to major investors. Callista would speak about leading through innovation to an audience that included pension fund managers, venture capitalists, and 3 state senators. I arrived at 7:15. Callista had left an hour earlier to handle last-minute preparations. She'd asked me one final time to skip the party, for the good of everyone involved. I'd declined politely. My invitation came from an unexpected source. Eleanor Hayes, my largest client, had called Tuesday morning. Daniel, I'll be at the Cromwell Capital Party Thursday. Callista's company has been courting Pinnacle Manufacturing for 6 months. Courting you for what? Investment partnership. They want to manage our pension fund, $200 million. Interesting, Callista hadn't mentioned pursuing Pinnacle Manufacturing. Eleanor, would you do me a favor? Name it. If anyone asks how we know each other, just say we're discussing a major consulting contract. We are discussing a major consulting contract. The EPA compliance project is worth $300,000. Perfect. See you Thursday. I wore the Armani tuxedo, the one I'd bought for Sarah's high school graduation but never worn. Callista thought it was too expensive for someone unemployed. Tonight seemed like the right occasion. The Fairmont lobby was packed with Seattle's business elite. Women in designer gowns, men in custom tuxedos, everyone networking with champagne and practiced smiles. I recognized most of the faces from 8 years of country club dinners where I'd been introduced as just helping with the kids. Eleanor spotted me first. Daniel! She approached with her trademark confidence. 40 years old, steel gray hair, wearing a black Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Eleanor, you look spectacular. You clean up pretty well yourself. She took my arm like we were old friends, which we were in a professional sense. Is Callista here yet? She's holding court near the bar, talking to the pension fund managers from California. Perfect. We moved through the crowd together. Eleanor knew everyone, and everyone wanted to know Eleanor. CEO of a $3 billion manufacturing company, she was exactly the kind of client Cromwell Capital dreamed of landing. Eleanor Hayes! Callista's voice carried across the room. She approached us with her business development smile. I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it. Your company has quite a reputation. Callista beamed. Then she noticed me standing beside Eleanor. Daniel, what are you doing here? I invited him, Eleanor said smoothly. Daniel and I have been discussing a major consulting contract. I wanted to continue our conversation tonight. Callista's smile flickered. Consulting contract? EPA compliance for our new alloy specifications. $300,000 project. The number hit Callista like a physical blow. 300,000, she repeated. Daniel's work could save my company from losing a $240 million contract with Tesla, worth every penny. Callista looked back and forth between us. You two know each other? Know each other? Eleanor laughed. Daniel's been my primary technical consultant for 4 years. Best materials scientist I've ever worked with. The conversation around us was starting to quiet. Other guests were picking up fragments of our discussion. 4 years? Callista's voice was getting higher. Actually, Eleanor continued, I'm curious how you two know each other. Daniel, How do you know, Callista? The silence around us was now complete. 23 people were listening to our conversation, including Bill Henderson from the country club, Janet standing beside him, 3 pension fund managers from California, 2 reporters from the Times, and Gregory Whitfield, my patent attorney, who'd arrived 10 minutes ago at my invitation. Callista is my wife, I said calmly. Eleanor's eyebrows went up. Your wife? 22 years this December. Well, that's fascinating. Callista, you never mentioned you were married to Daniel Mitchell. Callista looked like she was drowning. We... It's complicated. Bill Henderson pushed through the crowd. Daniel, I didn't know you'd be here. Callista, you didn't tell me your husband was our technical consultant. Your technical consultant? One of the pension fund managers asked. Daniel saved our company 6 months ago, Bill explained. Battery chemistry analysis. Prevented us from wasting $2 million. Janet joined the group. Daniel, we had no idea you were Callista's husband. She always said you were unemployed. The word unemployed echoed through our growing audience like a gunshot. Eleanor turned to Callista. Unemployed? Callista's face was pure red. There was a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? Eleanor asked. Gregory Whitfield chose that moment to approach our group. Daniel, I brought those patent certificates you requested. He handed me a leather portfolio. All 23 approved patents, including the new titanium composite applications. 23 patents, one of the reporters said. In advanced materials science, Gregory confirmed. Daniel's portfolio is worth approximately $2.8 million in licensing fees. The crowd around us was now 30 people and growing. Callista was staring at the patent portfolio like it was a live grenade. Callista, Eleanor said carefully, I'm a little confused. You told me you were looking for a technical consultant for our partnership discussions. I am. But you're married to the best technical consultant in the Pacific Northwest. We keep business and personal separate. Eleanor smiled. That's interesting, because Cromwell Capital has been using Mitchell Technical Solutions for 4 years. I know because I referred them to you. Callista's face went white. You referred them? Of course. Daniel does excellent work. When you mentioned needing materials analysis, I suggested you contact his company. His company? Mitchell Technical Solutions. You've paid them over $600,000 for technical consulting. The silence was now absolute. 40-plus people, all staring at Callista. So let me understand this, one of the pension fund managers said slowly. You've been paying your husband's company $600,000 while telling people he's unemployed? Callista opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I decided to help. Actually, I said, it's closer to $800,000 when you include this year's contracts. $800,000? Eleanor repeated. Mitchell Technical Solutions had our best year yet. $920,000 in total revenue. Bill Henderson was grinning. Callista, your unemployed husband makes almost $1 million a year? From consulting, I confirmed. Materials science, patent analysis, EPA compliance, mostly for technology companies and manufacturing firms. Including his wife's investment firm, Eleanor added helpfully. The crowd was murmuring now, fragments of conversation mixing together. Unemployed husband? $1 million consulting business. Didn't know her own husband's profession. Callista found her voice. If you'll excuse me, I need to use the ladies' room. She walked away with as much dignity as she could manage, which wasn't much. Eleanor watched her leave, then turned to me. Daniel, that was either the most elegant revenge I've ever witnessed or the cruelest public humiliation. Probably both. Any regrets? I looked around at the crowd. 43 successful business leaders, all of whom now knew that Callista had spent 8 years introducing her millionaire husband as unemployed. Ask me tomorrow. But honestly, 8 years of being invisible and 30 seconds of being seen. The math worked out perfectly. Gregory collected my patent portfolio. Eleanor discussed the EPA compliance project with potential investors. Bill invited me to speak at his company's board meeting, and I finally understood what it felt like to be introduced correctly. Daniel Mitchell, materials scientist and technical consultant. Not helping with the kids, not between opportunities, not unemployed, just my name and my actual profession. It was surprisingly nice. Callista didn't return to the party. I stayed until 11:30, networking with people who'd been ignoring me for 8 years. Turns out, when you're introduced as a successful consultant instead of an unemployed husband, conversations go very differently. Friday morning brought the first consequences. The Seattle Times business section led with a story titled, Investment Executive Unaware of Husband's $1 million Consulting Empire, complete with photos from the holiday party. Callista found the newspaper on our kitchen table and read it over coffee without speaking. The article was actually fair to both of us. It focused on the unusual business arrangement rather than personal embarrassment, but the implications were clear. How do you manage $200 million in client investments when you don't know your own husband's profession? Sarah called at 9:15. Dad, Ryan and I just saw the Times article. And? You really make almost $1 million a year? This year, yes. From consulting, materials science, and patent analysis. Silence on the phone. Sarah, are you still there? We told everyone you were unemployed. I know. For years, all through high school and college, everyone we know thinks you don't work. That's going to be awkward to correct. Another silence. Dad, why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? She thought about that. Probably not. Then what would have been the point? Sarah was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, she said finally. For what? For being embarrassed of you, for thinking you were a failure, for telling people you didn't have a real job. Sarah, you believed what you were told. That's not your fault. Whose fault is it? Good question. Nobody's fault, I said. Just a family that stopped communicating effectively. Ryan called an hour later with similar questions and similar apologies. But the real consequences came from Callista's business world. Eleanor Hayes called at noon. Daniel, I'm withdrawing Pinnacle Manufacturing from consideration for the Cromwell Capital Partnership. Because of last night? Because of what last night revealed about their business practices. Which practices specifically? Daniel, they hired their CEO's husband as a technical consultant without disclosing the relationship to clients. That's a massive conflict of interest. She was right. Eleanor, the technical analysis was always accurate. I'm not questioning your competence. I'm questioning their transparency. Fair point. Will this affect our ongoing projects? I asked. Not at all. If anything, I want to expand our relationship. But I can't work with Cromwell Capital anymore. 2 more clients called with similar concerns by Friday afternoon. Not about my work, about Callista's business ethics. Companies don't like discovering their investment advisors have undisclosed relationships with their primary consultants. By 5 o'clock, Callista had lost 3 major clients. Total revenue impact, approximately $12 million. She found me in my office around 6. Daniel, we need to talk. About what? About salvaging my company. Callista sat down across from my desk. She looked exhausted. The Henderson account is under review. Pinnacle Manufacturing is gone. Davidson Industries wants a full audit of all our consulting relationships. I'm sorry. Are you? Honest question. I'm sorry your business is suffering. I'm not sorry the truth came out. Callista leaned back in her chair. The board is meeting Monday morning. They want to discuss my future with the company. Your future? Whether I should step down as CEO. That was faster than I'd expected. What will you tell them? I don't know yet. Callista was quiet for a minute. Daniel, if I resign from Cromwell Capital, what happens to us? What do you mean? I mean, if I'm not the successful CEO anymore, if you're the primary breadwinner, what happens to our marriage? Interesting question. What do you want to happen? I want to understand who you really are. After 22 years of marriage. After 22 years of marriage where I apparently never paid attention. She stood up and moved toward the door. The divorce papers, she said. What about them? I'm withdrawing them. This morning I filed a motion to dismiss. Why? Because they were based on false assumptions about our financial situation. Callista paused at the doorway. Daniel? Yes? If we stay married, I'd like to know my husband's actual profession. Materials scientist and technical consultant. I'd like to know about your business, your clients, your patents. That can be arranged. I'd like to understand how someone can run $1 million consulting company from a basement office without their family knowing. That might take longer to explain. Callista smiled for the first time in days. We have time. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about consequences. Callista's career was probably over at Cromwell Capital, but she was brilliant and hardworking. She'd rebuild somewhere else. My consulting business was now public knowledge. Some clients would appreciate the transparency. Others would find new consultants. But for the first time in 8 years, my family knew who I actually was. The math still worked out perfectly. 6 months later, things had settled into a new normal. Callista left Cromwell Capital in February and started her own investment firm. Smaller client base, but complete transparency about all business relationships, including the fact that her husband owns Mitchell Technical Solutions. Some clients appreciate the honesty, others find it unusual, but nobody discovers it accidentally anymore. Sarah graduated from State with a business degree and asked if she could intern with my consulting firm over the summer. Turns out material science is more interesting than she'd realized. Ryan transferred to Washington State's engineering program, says he wants to understand what his father actually does for work. The country club dinners are different now. When people ask what I do, Callista introduces me as Daniel Mitchell, who runs Mitchell Technical Solutions. No hesitation, no embarrassment, no editing. I've started speaking at industry conferences about advanced materials and patent strategy. Callista comes to most of them, networking with potential clients for her new firm. We're building something together instead of parallel to each other. The basement office is still soundproof, but the door stays open when I'm not on client calls. Callista brings me coffee and asks about projects. Sometimes she has useful insights about the business side of technical consulting. Marriage counseling helped us understand how we'd stopped communicating effectively somewhere along the way, how assumptions had replaced conversations, how parallel lives had replaced partnership. We're working on that. The consulting business is busier than ever. 8 new clients this year, including several referred by Eleanor Hayes. Annual revenue will probably hit $1.2 million. Not bad for someone who was unemployed. Last week, Callista and I were invited to speak at a business conference about transparency in family-owned enterprises. Apparently, our story resonates with other couples who work in related industries. The presentation went well. During the Q&A, someone asked how long I'd hidden my business from my family. I never hid it, I answered. They just never asked what I was doing in my office for 8 hours a day. Callista added, sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we assume we don't need to have. Good advice for anyone. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Sometimes being underestimated is the most powerful position you can hold, but eventually, someone needs to look closely enough to see who you really are. In my case, it just took 22 years.